Hey, what's up guys, Metal571 here, and today I want to talk about another challenger to the HD600, the Audio-Technica ATH-R70x. This has been one of the more requested reviews, so let's get on with it. First of all, as usual, the hardware. Wow, okay, this is actually a pretty decently built headphone. I do have an AD900X, which is also slated for review. But this one really definitely has a strong metal headband here, though the wings are still made out of plastic. It's almost like, I think they actually collaborated with a company when designing the hardware for this headphone. I don't remember the name of it. Lachlan mentioned it in his review, I believe. And it's like they did a hybrid design between them and like their wings onto this kind of headphone. Headband, which is interesting. The grills here are definitely made of metal as well. At least it feels like it. Okay. And the ear pads are nice and soft. They're pretty much the usual Audio-Technica material for ear pads. However, the ear cups here are smaller than their traditional audiophile headphones, the AD series. But I think the opening is still a decent size. The build quality is pretty good. I mean, there's still the use of plastic in here, but there's also the use of metal, so it's kind of like a hybrid design, like I said. It's not bad. It's definitely better than the HD600's mostly plastic design. That's one of the things I complained about the most, is really the build quality of the HD600, back in my HD600 review, excuse me. But it still had a metal headband, and so does this. So there's really nothing I can fault it for here, at least against the 600. The reason why I'm comparing to the 600 is because a lot of headphones have been showing up in its price range that are trying to challenge it, this being one of them. So a lot of this review is definitely going to reference the HD600. If you haven't already seen my HD600 review, you should check that out. Alright, so that's pretty good. The cable here is detachable. Both sides have individual plugs. That's actually a good thing from an audio perspective, because you get separate, you get the same amount of energy going to both ear cups, whereas when you run a wire across here, sometimes there can be a channel imbalance or otherwise some quality loss. I know it seems ridiculous and seems nitpicky, but hey, they do it. So does the 600. Same thing. Separate connections for each ear cup. I know it's a little bit more annoying to have cables on both sides of your head, but you get used to it. So yeah, the cable's pretty good. It doesn't hold its shape too poorly. My God, it's far better than the HE400S cable that I was talking about in a previous review. Terminated a nice strong jack with a pro threading here for a 1/4-inch adapter. So quite decent. I don't really have any complaints about the cable, but you can always upgrade it. Actually, I'm not sure if you can upgrade this guy, because they use a proprietary locking mechanism. I'd have to get back to you guys on that one. But suffice to say, the cable it comes with is pretty decent. Comfort-wise, I found these quite good. I could really wear these for very long periods of time with no fatigue at all. They sit, and these support your head nicely, unlike some of their other headphones, which kind of have an awkward fit for some people, including myself. It's something you just got to get used to. But for these, you get a much more snug fit. They got a little bit more clamping force, kind of more like a professional headphone usually has. And the wings support your head a lot better. They have a decent amount of force here, a little bit more so than some of their other headphones. I also have the A900X and the AD900X. The A900X I've reviewed as of this video. AD900X is still pending, but yeah, these wings support you really well. It's very soft pads here. I think there's enough room in here. I think maybe some people may find them just slightly cramped, but I didn't have any problems. They're deep enough that your ear doesn't really touch the driver. But again, if you have really big ears, you may want to give these a shot, or at least buy them from somewhere where you can return them. Just a precaution. So these are an open back reference headphone. I didn't mention that before. Fully open back, so of course you can't use these in public. They are designed for referencing and studio use only. Now, another thing that's really interesting about this headphone is that This is by far the highest impedance headphone Audio-Technica has released. It is, I believe, 470 ohms, which is incredibly high. Being it against the HD600, there's a clear difference in volume, where this one is quieter than the HD600, which is already a somewhat difficult headphone to drive. So I haven't been talking about amplification lately, but I highly recommend an amplifier for these guys. You're kind of going to need it. Unlike a lot of other ATs, which run fine even off your phone at a much lower impedances and probably similar sensitivities. Alright, that out of the way, now we can talk about the part that everybody wants to hear about, which is the sound. Now this is very interesting. I think I like these, well, I'll talk about that more in the conclusion, but let's talk about the bass. First, the bass here goes lower than the HD600. I was very impressed actually with the bass in this headphone. Most dynamic driver headphones tend to roll off in the sub bass to a decent degree, and I found with these that's not really the case. They don't sound as good as a planar magnetic, of course, but despite what Golden Ears shows as measurements for these guys, I found the bass goes like really deep. It really digs down, and it sounds basically about the amount of bass that I would prefer in a headphone. Some people might call them slightly warm. People who are used to colder sounding headphones like a DT80 or Q701 may call these warm, bass boosted, whatever. But from my perspective, I think they have just about the right amount of bass. And it goes nice and deep, which is really surprising. You don't find that often on an open back headphone, but there's still a little bit of roll off on the very, very bottom that you won't get that visceral impact from a planar magnetic headphone, but it is really impressive extension, more so than the HD600 for sure. The HD600's biggest fault, I think, in the bass is that it does tend to roll off a bit early and somewhat severely. It's correctable by EQ to a degree. You don't want to boost it too much or you get some harmonic distortion. I'll talk about EQ some more later. The mid-range of this headphone is amazingly uncolored. However, it is slightly warm. I think there's a little bit more low mids than the HD600 here, and I like where the upper mids are at, though it sounds kind of grainy and somewhat indistinct compared to the HD600. This is not something you can fix with EQ. I tried EQing both of these headphones. The mid-range here just doesn't carry as much detail. However, it is incredibly uncolored, as close as I've heard to just flat out flat. The HD600's mids, by comparison, are slightly boosted. It's kind of a well-known fact. I EQ them down by about 3 or 4 dB. You don't really need to do that with this headphone, but in some cases I found that electric guitars stood out a bit more in some songs than others, which was odd because the same songs on the HD600 didn't stand out with the same track, whereas it did on this. So maybe there's some slight peakiness in the mids or some kind of ringing going on or something. I don't know. It's kind of a theme of this headphone's mids and treble is that it's just not quite as refined as the HD600. So carrying on with that, the treble. The treble on this headphone isn't bad, but it's also not as impressive as the HD600's treble. I mean, that's difficult to compare against. I happen to think the HD600 may have the best treble on a headphone this side of $400. That's just from what I've heard so far. These do a good job with a fairly neutral signature. Again, in the treble, maybe slightly dark, but the problem is there's also still a lack of refinement. There sounds like there might be some minor peaks here, there, 6, 8K maybe. Kind of sounds like there's some shimmer in there and some ringing that just doesn't quite sound right to me. Again, this headphone overall, however, is incredibly neutral, and that's such a phrase that everyone calls everything nowadays. But to me, this really strikes a Goldilocks across the board from bass to treble that I have never heard before, right out of the box without any EQ out of any other headphone. And that's probably one of its greatest strengths. You plug it into a powerful amp and it will sing. However, unfortunately, it does not have the refinement in the very top of the treble. It does not have the detail in the upper mid-range. However, it does have the bass extension that the HD600 is missing. And again, moving on to soundstage. Soundstage is definitely wider here. The imaging is slightly more accurate. However, the problem is, again, with very fast paced music. I tested this with some electronic music that has many layers in it, and it's easily confused. It's harder to pick out individual tracks from the final mix in this headphone. If there's a lot going on, things tend to get blurred together. Electric guitars can bury some details in the drum kit, whereas the HD600, they're more distinctly separate and more detailed and more refined and clearer sounding. This one kind of mushes them together more. They're just not as transparent is really one of the words that people use. That said, they're not bad. Again, they're probably the flattest headphone I've heard just about across the board. For those who have heard this, that'll give you a good idea of what I think is neutral in terms of sound signature. However, there are faults in this headphone that cannot be fixed with equalization. And it's funny, the more headphones I try that tries to beat the HD600, the more I realize that the HD600's drivers are just incredibly detailed by comparison to most things anywhere near their price range. And it's interesting because getting into EQ myself quite a bit, I found that, EQ is very helpful, but there's a lot of situations where you're just not going to get that sound, that natural organicness to the music. Like, I kind of like to say that you can taste the hi-hats on the HD600. You just can't quite get there on anything like below its price range. It's really, really impressive of a headphone, this thing. I've tried to have stuff beat it so far. Man, the treble is so good. I think I said the same thing in my HD600 review, just reiterating that. It's so good. However, on the other hand, the R70X isn't total crap. It's actually really good. However, and also it's really good because it has better bass extension than the 600, and it's better out of the box without any EQ in terms of accuracy. However, the HD600, after you apply some equalization, for me that means boosting the top, the highs a little bit, boosting the sub bass and cutting the upper mid, is so much more, okay, not so much more, but it's that next level of refinement that I just don't get in this guy. And that is really what it comes down to. That's the takeaway that I want you guys to get out of this video. This is kind of justified in a way. I feel that you could get close to the sound of this without quite as much bass refinement if you were to buy like a 558 or a 598 and EQ it. However, again, that might be a little bit of a long shot. I would need to have one next to me to really tell you guys for sure. But against the HD600 back and forth, the pluses, again, better bass extension, wider soundstage, better imaging. The minuses, just not as refined, just simply grainier, not as transparent, but more neutral. Very, very close to just simply straight up uncolored across the board, plugging right in. But you just don't get that detail, that clarity, that just makes music so much more enjoyable to me personally, that you can get with the HD600 after applying some EQ in my case. So that's what I want to say. Kind of a more complicated review there. Hope that makes sense to you guys. This retails right now for about $349. It's kind of expensive. I still think it should be dropped maybe to $299. I think it would sit all right in the $250 to $299 range just fine. The HD600 as of this video is costing $399, and amazingly enough, I still would pay that for it. It is that good. I still think it needs EQ to really shine in a good amp, but man, is it really, really refined, and is quite worthy of its price tag. I was lucky. I think I bought this one for around $270. It went down to $230 on a sale. Some people got an awesome deal maybe about a year ago. But yeah, that's how much we're looking at here. And last thing I want to say is the HE400S, I do not like as much as this guy. I think this is a better headphone than the HE400S. It should be. It's much better built. I think it sounds better overall, cleaner. Yeah, I know, slightly cleaner. However, it even has better bass extension, I feel like, than that 400S. And yeah, well, it does cost $50 more, so there's that. So that's what I think. Put any more questions, comments, always appreciated from you guys. And I'll see you guys in the next video.